Video games have become a cultural phenomenon in our modern world, integrated so heavily into our lives that people who play them can potentially make more money doing so on stream than a working-class businessman. Video game streamers and essayists are getting more viewership than late-night TV shows in some cases, and even the news. And although the mediocrity and preachiness of those old platforms are in part to blame, the impact and significance that many of these games had on the most recent few generations simply cannot be overstated. From GoldenEye to God of War, these digital worlds were more than just pastimes to so many of us. They also represent some of our best memories. Late nights and sleepovers with our closest friends, when the world seemed so small that we just couldn't wait to get into another match. There was no drama but the theatrics on our screens, so our minds wandered and dreamed of something more. The adventures of what could be, slaying dragons, saving damsels, secret agents, and saving the world. In a society seemingly hell-bent on beating these dreams out of us, we had one major escape.
We're unveiling the Xbox. This is the product that will be out later this year. You may have been wondering what this draped device was here. This is the Xbox. And so, for the first time, let me now unveil Xbox.
In November of 2001, Microsoft unveiled their newest invention and their first foray into video game home console entertainment, the Xbox. After more than a decade of TV ads and marketing for Sega and Nintendo so prominently and effectively synonymizing themselves with video games that parents referred to every game and console as a Nintendo for around 2 decades, and with the Sony PlayStation having released to critical and commercial acclaim only a couple of years prior, the Xbox had its work cut out for it. The executives over at Microsoft knew this, however, and had been working out how best to handle the quest to catch consumer attention. Just as Nintendo had done with Mario, Sega with Sonic, and Sony with Snake, Microsoft needed a hard-hitting console exclusive to bring the customers in, and it needed to fill a market that wasn't really being filled. The geniuses over at id Software had set a new standard for action video games with their ever-growing catalog of industry-revolutionizing games like Doom and Quake, so much to the point that other developers had begun utilizing their technology to copy id Software games, resulting in a genre affectionately referred to as Doom clones. Not to mention, by this point, Half-Life had already been released, and that was basically regarded as the pinnacle of what an adult-oriented video game was capable of. Amazing as all these titles were, they all shared a common problem. They were, for the most part, exclusive to the PC. You had ports of certain titles to home console, but none of them even came close to measuring up to their PC counterparts, and were seen as widely inferior. The barrier to entry for these kinds of games was pretty big at the time, though most people might not remember how much trouble PC games used to be. Just having a personal computer was not enough. You needed to have the right components in your device, otherwise, even if you slipped that Quake CD into your PC, it might not run smoothly, or at all. But for most, this was seen as the only way to access all those epic, more violent video games. This caused the console market to be seen as a sort of more family-friendly option, with exceptions like Metal Gear or Castlevania 64. There was a gap in the market, and whether Microsoft was aware of it or not, they were about to fill it. These days, video games are a dime a dozen. You can go onto Steam and find thousands of different indie titles made on the Unity or Unreal Engine to sort of offer a vague facade of pretty much whatever niche you're looking for. But back then, making video games was hard. Even harder than rocket science, actually. And that's not my words. That's a real quote from John Carmack, who, if you don't know, coded the video game engine for Doom and Quake that would go on to act as the framework for pretty much every single engine that came after it. He is also literally a rocket scientist with his own private rocket ship contracting company called Armadillo Aerospace. So yeah, if he says coding games used to literally be harder than rocket science, I believe him, because he did both. The reason for saying all of that is to really point out that it wasn't so easy to find a competent team to help you manifest your console exclusive, but the Xbox would end up finding its dream team in the most unlikely of places. Ever heard of Nop? Well, I'm sure you have even if you don't know it, because it's Pong, but spelled backwards. It was also developed by a man named Alex Seropian, who would go on from this point to officially incorporate his own video game development company and release Nop for free under that name in 1990. That company was called Bungie. Although he didn't make any money off of Nop other than selling its source code for $15, that wasn't the point. Alex wanted the practice. His next project would be even bigger, as he designed and released a top-down shooter called Operation Desert Storm, which would impressively go on to sell roughly 2,500 copies in 1991. The title was an admirable work from a single developer, but Alex was pushing his limits as a one-man developer. He needed a team for his company. While in his college fraternity, Alex met a like-minded individual named Jason Jones, who demonstrated a similar drive and ambition to Alex, and the two agreed they had to begin working together. It wouldn't take long before the two had already finished their first game in less than a year after starting. That game was Minotaur: The Labyrinth of Crete. This adventure game was reviewed favorably, but its biggest selling point was that it was multiplayer, which was a hard-to-come-by commodity in 1992 when this game actually released. Let's fast forward just one more year to 1993, when Alex's new team of just 3 people have just released one of the more ambitious dungeon crawler first-person shooters currently on the market. Their ambitious FPS dungeon crawler was called Pathways into Darkness, and was a critical and commercial success given the budget it was produced on. Although originally set to be a sequel to the preceding Bungie game titled Minotaur: Labyrinths of Crete, it eventually just became its own unique story. Pathways into Darkness was Bungie's first commercial success, to the point of selling 20,000 copies and allowing the company the budget to move, expand, and begin development on their next title, Marathon. From 1994 to 1996, all of Bungie's efforts were consolidated and focused on creating a trilogy of science fiction FPS games called the Marathon Trilogy. All 3 games were developed for the Mac OS, making them hard to access by PC owners, but causing Mac owners to feel like they really had something special. Marathon was one of the first titles in the industry to feature reloading mechanics, dual-wielding weapons, and most importantly, the ability to use the mouse in order to look around. These features are commonplace today, but Marathon was one of the trailblazer video games that would help set the standard far earlier than it would eventually become popularized. Marathon also brought with it a dark sci-fi tone that was becoming increasingly popular at the time, with a story featuring everything from derelict spaceships to rogue AIs. Marathon quickly established itself as a hidden gem. The follow-up titles, Marathon 2 Durandal and Marathon Infinity, were also considered successes, with Marathon 2 selling over 200,000 copies. Standing proud atop what they had achieved so far, Bungie was not slowing down. They had big plans for the future of their company and were excited to start putting work in on more varied and diverse titles to put under their company belt. The Macintosh had proven to be a good home for the team, and following the release of their final Marathon game, they were already hard at work prepping the release of their new real-time strategy game, Myth. Set in a fantasy world, Myth: The Fallen Lords released in 1997, just 1 year after Marathon Infinity, and Bungie had their development strategies down to a science, because after this, they released the follow-up to The Fallen Lords 1 year later with Myth 2: Soulblighter dropping in 1998. Bungie had nothing to prove to anyone, but they were setting the industry on fire with an admirable understanding and capacity for game development. While the core team focused their efforts on designing their Myth titles, Bungie opened up another branch of their studio called Bungie West in 1997, and tasked them with designing a third-person style action game called Oni. Oni would be the one and only game developed by Bungie West before the branch was closed and the team was consolidated back into the core studio. Thanks to the success of Myth, Bungie's fantasy real-time strategy series, the team was itching to get back to their science fiction roots as development began on a sci-fi RTS referred to in-house as Armor, a working title which would eventually be changed to Blam. The sci-fi RTS would undergo the longest development cycle Bungie had ever done, turning from an RTS to a third-person shooter until finally becoming a full-fledged first-person shooter in the vein of their previous title, Marathon. Armor, or Blam, was being developed for the Mac, just like all previous Bungie titles, even going as far as being shown at an Apple showcase event, stunning fans and executives alike with its groundbreaking visuals and gameplay rivaling even industry giants like Quake and Half-Life. They also announced a new name for the project, officially calling it by its final name, Halo. It was abundantly clear to everyone that this game was going to be something big, and Apple was going to benefit extensively from exclusivity to this stunning new video game title. As mentioned earlier though, Apple's biggest rival, Microsoft, was currently about to attempt breaking into the video game market in a huge way, and this is exactly what they were looking for. It wasn't long before Microsoft had made an offer to buy Bungie outright and publish their new game on Microsoft hardware. This new game would launch alongside the Xbox, acting as a launch title and incentive for consumers to choose the Xbox over its competitors. At this point, their game had turned into something entirely different than the team's original vision. From a real-time strategy Macintosh game to an Xbox-exclusive first-person shooter launch title, what happened next was nothing short of industry-changing. Halo released to critical and commercial acclaim as critic and consumer alike stumbled over themselves to play and praise this revolutionary new title, being hailed as one of the best shooters available and one of the most important video games ever made. No matter the media, good stories are timeless. Not because of what they are, but because of what they mean to us. So I can't say I find it surprising that one of the best stories in the industry is so difficult to pin down to a genre. Action, drama, tragedy, thriller, horror, space opera, epic. Halo's narrative spans so many ideas in such a little story, somehow managing to feel just as massive and grand as it does small and personal. It's almost difficult for me to figure out what to say in a sense because I don't really know what this game looks like from an outside perspective. It's been with me since I can remember. I was in love with this game since I was at least 5 years old, because I can distinctly remember the excitement of finding out there was a Halo 2 coming out when I was 6 years old. So when I say it's difficult for me to remember what life was like without this story, I mean it. I can understand why it would be easy to just write off this game as a linear series of levels meant to distract you from responsibilities or pass time between life events. But what can I say? Life events have become tedious and dull in our modern world. I wasn't thrilled to know my fate and the fate of our culture would be arduous repetition and simply getting by until we all eventually die. When we're here though, things are different. The fate of the Earth, of humanity, depends on you. Stranded in unknown space with no way home and hunted by an aggressive military of aliens who are dedicated to seeing you and your people literally burned to dust. The mystery of a giant alien ring world floating in space and discovering why it's there, what it's for, and how to escape it. The horror of uncovering the truth about the ring's prisons and what's being contained there. The sorrow of watching as your comrades die one by one and knowing it's up to you to ensure that their deaths are not in vain. And I know it's not just me either. Within 1 year of its release, Halo Combat Evolved sold over 1 million copies. Before its run was finished, it would go on to sell over 8 million copies in total. I genuinely believe it would be fair to say that creators of this game ended up making something far bigger than themselves. Halo became a phenomenon, a compelling FPS with a huge scale, vehicle combat, and sci-fi fantasy story to rival the best of them. But most importantly, it was co-op. The average FPS game during that time period was something of an isolating experience. Just you and your monitor in a dark room questing through strange new worlds. Doom, Half-Life, Quake, Blood, whatever. All single player. You could crowd around your friends who owned the game and cheer him on, or you could take turns in between levels. But there was no way to share the adventure, not really. Halo introduced a way for you and a friend to share that adventure together with a fully beginning-to-end multiplayer cooperative campaign. That's how I experienced Halo and its subsequent sequels. This was probably one of the most important factors that contributed to Halo's success. I can imagine friends coming together and splitting the cost of an Xbox just so they could play Halo's co-op. The nights of hanging out and dying over and over together just to make it through these missions. I had to address this game's co-op because it's so important to what made Halo so special. I've played through the original Halo all of the way through with like probably 10 to 12 people throughout my life. All of that being said, the effect that co-op has on Halo is almost entirely metatextual. So for this video, I've played through it exclusively single player to put an emphasis on the solo experience. I will also focus on the original graphics pretty much exclusively, but I will address the remaster later in the video. But first, let's talk about versions. I recognize that the most authentic experience would be to play Halo CE on an original Xbox attached to a CRTV with component cables. That being said, I do not think that is in any way the optimal way to play, especially for newcomers of the series. Look, I know we all have fond memories of it, but recreating that experience for modern audiences is just a turnoff without the added benefit of nostalgia. For this video, the footage you will see I recorded on the Steam Master Chief Collection PC port of the game, which at this time is probably the best way to experience it. My first time playing the game was, if I am remembering correctly, on either a friend or a cousin's Xbox. My family did not own an Xbox at the time though, so the first copy of Halo I ever owned was the Gearbox PC port of the game released in late 2003. I had to play it on the family computer, but man, I was obsessed with it, even if it barely ran and I could not play co-op or multiplayer with it. I never did manage to beat the game on that copy due to the fact that I rarely got to play it. Eventually, some years later, my older brother would buy an Xbox, and with it, the mesmerizing game that had become almost mythical to my childlike mind. I was only ever exposed to it when someone else I knew owned an Xbox, but I didn't really ever get to play it myself unless I got some free time on the PC. The Gearbox port had good and bad about it. The good was the extra access to the game, the new maps, and the small community of modders that would come from it. I even remember playing with a map editor on Sidewinder, placing and moving trees around as a kid. It was fun, you know? It was a different and unique way to actually interact with Halo. The bad was that the extra maps weren't great and the optimization wasn't either. As grateful as I am to this port of the game for existing, it's probably one of the worst ways to experience the game, which pretty much no one will ever do now that it's available on Steam via a far better port. Alright, I've hyped this experience up for long enough. I think it's time we just get into it. No skulls or anything, this will be the classic Halo CE experience, and I'll be running it on heroic difficulty because the developers themselves have stated in the original game on the menu that this is the way Halo was meant to be played. I will throw it out there though, I've beaten Halos 1 through 3 and Reach on Legendary multiple times per game. I'm just trying to bring the most authentic footage for this video.
Sir?
Right. Let's thaw him out.
Okay. Bringing low-level systems online. Cracking the case in 30 seconds.
Steam pours out from the cryo-freezing pod as our protagonist steps out and we assume his role seeing the world from his eyes. If you're playing this for the first time, there's a little tutorial minigame to familiarize the player with how to look around as the chief, but we're skipping that and getting straight into the action. Following this engineer out, we head for the door only to have the door explode and kill him. I feel like this sets the mood for the game. Things aren't going to be a straight, obvious path, and you'll have to think quick to survive. In a time where most games started by having the player immediately start shooting at things, Halo took the direction of Half-Life, starting the player off without any weapons to make them spend time absorbing the setting before they end up shooting everything. Now granted, Halo did it in a much shorter burst, but it does paint a picture for the player to run through the halls totally defenseless while getting shot at by these strange and colorful aliens. Making our way to the bridge where the captain needs us ASAP, we get one of the most iconic exchanges in the whole series.
Captain Keyes.
Good to see you, Master Chief. Things aren't going well. Cortana did her best, but we never really had a chance.
A dozen Covenant superior battleships against a single Halcyon-class cruiser. With those odds, I'm content with 3, make that 4 kills. Sleep well?
No thanks to your driving, yes.
So you did miss me.
Report!
It must have been one of their boarding parties. I'd guess an antimatter charge.
Ma'am! Fire control for the main cannon is offline!
Captain, the cannon was my last offensive option.
All right, then. I'm initiating Cold Protocol Article 2. We're abandoning the Autumn. That means you too, Cortana.
While you do what? Go down with the ship?
In a manner of speaking. The object we found, I'm gonna try and land the Autumn on it.
With all due respect, sir, this war has enough dead heroes.
I appreciate your concern, Cortana, but it's not up to me. Protocol is clear. Destruction or capture of a shipboard AI is absolutely unacceptable, and that means you're leaving ship. Lock in a selection of emergency landing zones, upload them to my neural lace, and then sort yourself for a heart transfer.
Aye, aye, sir.
Which is where you come in, Chief. Get Cortana off this ship. Keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research, Earth.
I understand.
The Autumn will continue evasive maneuvers until you initiate a landing sequence. Not that you'll listen, but I'd suggest letting my subroutines handle the final approach.
Excellent work, Cortana. Thank you. Are you ready?
Yank me.
Good luck, Master Chief.
Your architecture isn't much different from the Autumn's.
Don't get any funny ideas.
I don't keep it loaded, son. You'll have to find ammo as you go.
The design of the bridge, the fact that you can see the physical halo ring in the distance, although clearly just a small model, the people hard at work. This is such a great way to set the tone for what's about to happen. Leaving the bridge, we load our Magnum and kill some grunts, the first of the aliens we will be dispatching of on this adventure, with many more to come. Shortly after, making our way through a few halls, we end up in the mess hall area where we face off against our first elite, which is the human name for the Sangheili aliens. Of course, I make pretty short work of them, but this is such a great way to bring in this enemy, with your allies all pouring ammunition out of their assault rifles to support you. A few notable things about this first mission. The attention to detail of letting the player see a window where launching escape pods are being destroyed right in front of you is so cool. I can't think of another game that was going this hard to immerse the player into the world at the time. Another thing is that even this first level has a little bit of verticality where you move up some stairs fighting through aliens the whole way, which Halo's massive levels and huge verticality was totally unmatched on its release. But having a taste of that in this opening level was just pure genius. Of course, we have the vents, which have little to no lighting, so the player has to rely on his flashlight to get through them. Something cool to note about that is the flashlight really doesn't get used much in the game. They still took the time to program a flashlight function and even make it drain in battery over time, which, while cool, doesn't really ever serve a purpose in the game. This was likely due to the more horror-themed levels later originally having attempted to be darker and scarier at the time, but I'll say more on that later. We head down a few more hallways and here we are, boarding the escape pod and getting off of this ship. This is one of the greatest opening levels of all time in any video game ever. It's also the shortest mission in the game if you're playing it straight absent any speedrunning tech or glitches. You can easily clear it in roughly 15 minutes if you're taking your time with it. Because Bungie was so smart on how they handled their mission progression, the game features a lot of reused assets, but in a very reasonable way that holds up in the universe. So in all actuality, they really only crafted 7 original missions, but reused the assets and in large part the same level layouts of the 3 of those 7 for the final 3 missions of the game. Given their time and budget, it's just brilliant.
I know, we're landing on it.
She's been hit!
I knew it. The Autumn's accelerating. Keys is going in manual.
Heads up, everyone, this is it. We're entering the ring's atmosphere in 5.
Sure you wouldn't rather take a seat?
We'll be fine.
had fingers, they'd be crossed.
When most old school players think of Halo Combat Evolved, this is the level that comes to mind, which is actually pretty strange since no other level in the game has this aesthetic. The bright sun amid cool grassy plains and running waterfalls. Literally none of the other levels look like this, but going from the box art, you'd think more of the game resembled it. Nope, just this one level. Luckily, it's a fantastic level. Opening with Chief waking up and exiting the escape pod, where we see the Marines we tried to save died on impact. The bodies of our comrades sets the scene for the purpose of this level actually. The world around us is absolutely gorgeous. There was nothing else like this at the time, and it shows. Just a beautiful green landscape. See that planet up there? That's called Threshold for all my lore nerds out there. It's a gas giant. You can even see its moon, Basis, as well. This is all short-lived, however, as some Covenant phantoms come down and send out hunting parties after us. We cross a bridge, shoot down banshees, and make our way to a stone structure where some more of our boys crash-landed and have taken refuge. From here, it's going to be tower defense for a bit while we fend off a handful of phantoms dropping off Covenant at this structure to try and kill you and your Marines. Finally, we're shown the mechanic that made Halo stand out above its competitors at the time. One of our own ships comes in and drops off a Warthog, which is just the name given to what is essentially a military jeep. The driving mechanics were unlike anything else we'd really seen in a video game at the time. Well, in a shooter at least. Anyway, here's the line.
This cave is not a natural formation. Someone built it, so it must lead somewhere.
From here, the level kind of opens up. We can pick one of 3 different locations to go and rescue a series of Marines from, as they take refuge after surviving their crash. There's a section of rocks where some hid, a massive hill where they are fending off Covenant forces, and an underground bunker area where they are hiding. The player can pick which ones he does first, but after rescuing them, we mount the Pelican and move out onto the next mission.
We should move out, Lieutenant, and then we'll need your help on a rescue mission.
Touching down in a canyon area, we're treated to the spectacle of a Covenant capital ship hovering just above us in atmosphere. Night has fallen, so it's dark out, setting an excellent tone and atmosphere for the level. The Marines chatter about getting into the ship above, making it feel like a real military operation. And of course, we start with the iconic Halo sniper rifle. The aesthetic and feeling of this level is nothing short of breathtaking. Skulking through the canyons, sneaking up on unsuspecting grunts, hearing the bullets and plasma whiz through the air as you see multiple beams of light shining across the darkened rock faces. It's just banger after banger so far with these levels. I mean, look at the view we get as we approach the cliffside, re-cementing that feeling that this is a tactical operation to board an enemy vessel and free our captain. Speaking of, we finally reach the gravity lift meant to take us up into the ship, where we participate in another sort of wave defense style mechanic, taking on the multiple waves of Covenant infantry as they're sending down until we finally face off against their biggest unit, the Hunters. I'll talk more about these guys later, but this being their first appearance in the game is just fantastic. We take them down and ascend into the ship with our squad of Marines. When we get into the ship, we're treated to nothing. It's silent. The Marines even comment on how quiet it is. This part is pulse-pounding for those of you who are familiar. Invisible sword elites start coming out of the locked doors to take out your Marines when you're not looking, and even you too if you aren't quick enough. Such a memorable section. Right after, we fight off several more waves of Covenant in this room. We're tasked with taking down 2 more Hunters, which we're able to with some well-placed shots. Then we split off from the group for a while. What follows is a trek through the interior of the ship until we're able to locate the captain and his unit, then work in tandem with him to escape the ship by commandeering one of the Covenant's phantoms, treating us to this fantastic cutscene.
That's it. The dropship is moving.
Everybody, mount up. Let's get on board.
Give me a minute to interface with the ship's controls.
No need. I'll take this bird out myself.
Captain, Hunters!
Hang on.
When I was younger and someone talked about Halo, this was what came to my mind. This was the level for me. The way the scene fades in and you're just in the back of a Pelican watching 2 other Pelicans sway behind you, and even the way you see the Marines loading up and preparing to fight. And it's a whole beach storming sequence. This is like cinematic movie level sick. Storming a beach while an epic rendition of the main Halo theme pounds in the background, strings hitting, bullets flying, plasma burning. This is one of the coolest set pieces in the game, and to this day, experiencing it is still a phenomenal moment. Following the resolution of this brief moment, we're treated to a Warthog with which we are able to use to explore the rest of the island freely. The kind of liberty this grants the player to explore was super uncommon back then, especially in a shooter game. The status quo was a series of linear paths, like Half-Life, or a more explorable map of enclosed hallways like Quake or Doom. But just dropping the player on a small island and telling them to get on it wasn't something we'd really seen before this. So from here, that's exactly what we do. Mount up and hit the sandy beach in search of the so-called Silent Cartographer. The map is fairly large, honestly, and if it wasn't for the Warthog, would probably take the player a while to get across. It's not the biggest map in the game, but it is one of the most memorable. Of course, we're still playing a shooter, and it has to inevitably fall back into its linear corridor ways. So after making our way into a base where a door is locked, we have to trek across the other side of the island, deactivate the lock, then backtrack to the base again, and head inside to a series of descending linear staircases connecting arena-sized rooms full of Covenant soldiers. And it doesn't matter if you kill this elite before the door shuts, he's still here after you turn off the lock. Believe me, I've done it. After making it to the very bottom of this facility, we learn that this island opens up into a hollow interior beneath the ring's ecosystem that can be used for traversal. This is an insanely cool idea that is unfortunately never really utilized in this game or any Halo game until Infinite. But we do get a brief glimpse of these long connecting chambers inside Halo's hollow interior before starting our next mission. We're halfway through the game now, mission 5 of 10, and arguably the longest level in the game. Definitely the biggest one for sure. We arrive at a balcony where some Covenant forces have posted up defenses, and so we do what we do. Buckle up because the Master Chief is staging an assault on the control room. What is the control room? It's essentially a massive building which holds the room used for controlling Halo's subroutines and primary functions. This is obviously crucial because we have to get control of it before the Covenant use it against humanity. So far in the game, we've seen grassy plains, rocky cliffs, and sandy beaches, but Halo still has yet another biome to introduce us to. Fighting our way through these inner corridors, we eventually make our way outside to see snow. Wherever we are on the ring, it's quite a ways away from the Cartographer. We're literally in the mountains right now. This level actually has something of a flow to it. Interior area proceeds to an exterior bridge area leading to another interior, then a large outdoor arena, back into the interior area, and so on and so forth. I can recall being a kid playing co-op with my brother, and we'd say, let's just play a little bit, one mission. So often we'd skip straight to the Silent Cartographer level and agree to quit after that one and end up playing straight through this one too just because of how much fun it is. Getting to see the snow-covered chasms of this mission for the first time while playing really cements the beautiful variety of Halo's gorgeous biomes. I'm pretty much covering the narrative as we go level to level instead of its own section, so since we're halfway through the game, at this point let's recap. The story opens with a human ship called the Pillar of Autumn arriving at a mysterious Forerunner ring world after doing a random slipspace jump while fleeing from the planet Reach, which has just been invaded and basically glassed to ash at this point. A few Covenant vessels followed behind and have attempted to destroy the Pillar of Autumn, forcing the crew to use escape pods to flee to Halo's surface, as Captain Keyes crash lands the Autumn onto Halo as well. From there, the Master Chief works with Cortana, Sergeant Johnson, and Pelican pilot Echo 419 to rescue what survivors they can and formulate a way to fight back against the Covenant forces. Captain Keyes is taken captive by the Covenant and held prisoner on the Covenant capital ship called the Truth and Reconciliation. Chief joins up with the Marines he rescued and they assault the ship to break Keyes free. Keyes heard the Covenant mention that Halo is a weapon that could be used to wipe out humanity and decides they have to learn how to control it first. From there, Keyes and Johnson split off to make a camp somewhere as they decide their next move, while Chief, Cortana, and a handful of survivors travel to an island to locate a device called the Silent Cartographer, which can be used to learn the location of Halo's control room. which has led us to this mission, where we have to fight through an army of Covenant standing between us and that control room. And, oh yeah, we get a tank. Finally getting to the end of this area, we arrive at this huge pyramid-like structure. That's the control room we've been fighting towards. Once we're inside, we put Cortana into the console and she begins absorbing all of the Forerunner information about the ring. It takes only seconds before she begins to panic, sending Chief to leave her there and go locate where Captain Keyes is to prevent him from completing the mission he and his team are currently embarked on, making it clear that something very bad is about to happen.
So, what sort of weapon is it?
What are you talking about?
Let's stay focused. Halo, how do we use it against the Covenant?
This ring isn't a cudgel, you barbarian. It's something else. Something much more important. The Covenant were right. This ring, it's Forerunner. Give me a second to access. Yes, the Forerunner built this place, what they called a fortress world, in order to... Wait. No, that can't be. Oh, those Covenant fools. They must have known. There must have been signs.
Slow down. You're losing me.
The Covenant found something. Buried in this ring. Something horrible. And now, they're afraid.
Something buried? Where?
The Captain. We've got to stop the Captain.
Keys? What
the
are
weapons cache he's looking for. It's not really... We can't let him get inside.
I don't understand.
There's no time. Get out of here. Find Keyes. Stop him. Before it's too late!
This is where everything changes. When I was much younger, this game spoiled me on how interesting stories could be when implementing one of the platinum rules of world building, the rule of threes. I'll elaborate on that in a moment. Echo 419 drops us off in yet another unique biome and backdrop. It's raining, it's dark, it's wet, and we're in a swamp. The first thing of note is that nothing is happening. Here, see for yourself. Do you feel it? Don't worry, I'm not going to build it up more than it needs, just stating the importance that atmosphere plays in this level. We push forward and finally find some Covenant, but they're running away from something, and it's not clear what. We still engage in combat, obviously, as we near a bunker of some kind and see projectiles flying out of the entrance. That's our boys, we're hot on their tails. So we clear through the remaining forces and give chase into the bunker. From here on out, everything is... off.
Stay back! Stay back! You're not turning me into one of those things! I'll blow your brains out! Get away from me! Ah! Ah! Don't touch me, you freaks! I won't be like you, I'll die first! Find your own hiding place, the monsters are everywhere! Play dead! That's what I did. Play dead. They took the live ones. Oh god, I can still hear them. Monsters! Ah! Ah!
This turns out to be less of a bunker and more of a prison/researching facility of some kind, and something very wrong has happened. Look, pretty much all of you know what happens next, so let's get to it. The Chief gets to this prison room where he finds blood but no bodies, and checks out some recording footage which shows what happened here.
Hold still! Hold still! Let him have it! Ah! Sergeant, we're surrounded. God damn it, Jenkins! Fire your weapon! There are too many, Sarge! Don't even think about it, Marine. isn't local!
Back here, Marine! That's an order!
Take it!
There's another alien life being imprisoned on this ring world, and it's a parasitic life form that finds a host to kill and neurally implant into the body of. We've made a mistake. Keyes and his crew let these alien parasites called the Flood out of their prison, and now the Chief has to get out of this bunker and back to Cortana. It's all fighting corpses from here. Literally, the Flood has embedded itself into the bodies of both the Covenant and human forces, and so you're killing the corpses of both your comrades and your enemies. And this bunker starts to feel a little like a labyrinth to escape from while these things are chasing you the whole time. Once we reach the entrance, some Marines are waiting for us there to offer fire support as we fight our way through this jungle to an extraction point. Keeping them alive is really difficult actually. The Flood are just absolutely brutal. We reach a tower of some kind and start holding the LZ as we wait for our ride, but something happens. A unit of robots comes out of nowhere and starts shooting lasers to destroy the Flood and offer us some backup. Following this, a little floating blue ball arrives and starts talking to us.
Oh, hello. Greetings. I am the monitor of Installation 04. I am 343 Guilty Spark. Someone has released the Flood. My function is to prevent it from leaving this installation, but I require your assistance. Come, this way.
Chief, I lost your signal! Where'd you go? Chief! Chief!
We must collect the index before we can activate the installation.
Okay, so Halo is a prison world that contains an ancient spore-like parasitic life form called the Flood, and these Sentinel robots are used to prevent the parasite from spreading across the ring. This talking orb, 343 Guilty Spark, is the monitor of this entire ring world, which he refers to as Installation 04. Now that Captain Keyes has released the parasite, containment measures must be taken, which, according to Guilty Spark here, means activating Halo's defenses and eliminating the Flood. You following? Okay, good, because before we can go back to the control room and activate Halo's defenses, we need the key to turn it on. That key is called the Index, and it's kept in a giant mausoleum referred to as the Library, also known as the most notoriously frustrating level in the whole game. When you've seen 5 minutes of this level, you've seen the whole thing. It's an interior level with the same architecture for the duration of the whole building, and it's brimming with the Flood. The difficulty spike from the first 6 levels to this one is actually insane. The game has taught you until this point that combat means finding the right weapons, hitting good shots, combining grenades, and keeping a steady strafing movement. Throw all that away. This level makes you relearn everything. Combat just evolved. Now you run, you jump, you avoid, and you throw every grenade you can find. Shotguns and plasma weapons are your best friends. You just run through the level trying to avoid the Flood until you end up at a locked door where you're forced to hold your ground. The power fantasy is dead. You have become the prey, and all you can do is survive and make it through the library until you find the Index. Even I, a certified Halo veteran, struggled far more with this level specifically than I thought I would on this playthrough. There's just not much more to say on this level. You've seen it all. After we've gotten the Index, Guilty Spark takes us back to the control room via teleportation technology that's been created to make getting around the ring a little easier. Chief inserts the Index and, following Guilty Spark's order, prepares to activate the ring. Cortana stops the process though, and she isn't too happy with the Chief.
That wasn't supposed to happen.
Oh, really?
Cortana.
I've spent the last 12 hours cooped up in here watching you toady about, helping that thing get set to slit our throats.
Hold on now. He's a friend.
Oh, I didn't realize. He's your pal, is he? Your chum? Do you have any idea what that bastard almost made you do?
Yes. Activate Halo's defenses and destroy the Flood, which is why we brought the Index to the control center.
You mean this?
A construct in the core? That is absolutely unacceptable.
Sod off!
What impertinence! I shall purge you at once!
You sure that's a good idea?
How dare you? Oh!
Do what? I have the Index. You can just float and sputter.
Enough! The Flood is spreading. If we activate Halo's defenses, we can wipe them out.
You have no idea how this ring works, do you? Why the Forerunners built it? Halo doesn't kill Flood. It kills their food. Humans, Covenant, whatever. We're all equally edible. The only way to stop the Flood is to starve them to death. And that's exactly what Halo is designed to do. Wipe the galaxy clean of all sentient life. You don't believe me? Ask him.
Is it true?
More or less. Technically, this installation's pulse has a maximum effective radius of 25,000 light years. But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life. Or at least any life with sufficient biomass to sustain the Flood. But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you?
Left out that little detail, did he?
We have followed outbreak containment procedure to the letter. You were with me each step of the way as we managed this crisis.
Chief, I'm picking up movement.
Why would you hesitate to do what you've already done?
We need to go. Right now.
Last time you asked me, if it were my choice, would I do it? Having had considerable time to ponder your query, my answer has not changed. There is no choice. We must activate the ring.
Get us out of here.
If you are unwilling to help, I will simply find another. Still, I must have the Index. Give your construct to me, or I will be forced to take her from you.
That's not going to happen.
So be it. Save his head. Dispose of the rest.
Okay, so Halo is designed to literally purge a segment of the galaxy of all living organisms and starves the Flood. So this is obviously a problem. Cortana and Chief are back together again and making plans to stop Halo from being operational, permanently. Guilty Spark claims they need the Index to activate it, but just in case they figure out a way to do it without the Index, Cortana tells Chief they need to destroy these 3 phase pulse generators to cripple Halo's weapon system. As for the level itself, well, it's pretty much just the 5th level, Assault on the Control Room, but backwards. Kind of. Thankfully, it's not quite as long, and there are a lot of new areas in the upper echelons of the level that were there the whole time, but you wouldn't have ever known it on your first playthrough. This is easily the most verticality you'll get in the game, but it adds so much more breadth to the level that it doesn't even feel like it's the same map. Although, it is. You get to spend a lot of time in this flying vehicle called a Banshee, and it's just so much more than pretty much anything anyone had ever seen in a video game before. There's a healthy amount of areas we've seen before, mixed with areas we have not seen before, so I think it stays fun and fresh the whole time. The fact that it's dark also adds a new element of intrigue to the aesthetic. I mean, look at this. The darkness reflecting off of the snow, it makes it seem like it's a different map, even though it's very similar to the 5th mission's map, just because of the lighting and the new areas you're seeing and how much time you get to spend flying around in a vehicle. After you've hit all 3 of these phase pulse generators, Cortana tells the Chief that she has an idea on how to stop Halo. She believes she can utilize Halo's teleportation technology to transport them to the ship where the Covenant have imprisoned Keys, the same one we were on earlier, the Truth and Reconciliation.
From what I've been able to piece together, their leadership ordered all ships to abandon Halo when they found the Flood, but they were too late. The Flood overwhelmed this cruiser and disabled it. The Covenant are terrified the Flood will repair the ship and use it to escape from Halo. They've sent in a strike team to neutralize the Flood and repair the ship for immediate departure. I've got a good lock on Captain Key's CNI transponder signal. He's alive, and the implants are intact. There's some interference from the cruiser's damaged reactor. I'll bring us in as close as I can. Oh, I see. The coordinate data needs to be... Right. Sorry.
There and back again, we're back on the Covenant capital ship, except things are different now. With the Flood running loose across the ring currently, they've managed to get aboard the ship, and the Covenant are pretty pissed off about it. We've literally walked into the middle of a desperate war for survival from the Covenant as the Flood continue to eradicate and assimilate their forces. But we gotta stay focused and find Captain Keyes. We've seen a good bit of it already in the previous level, but this mission really shows the Covenant fighting the Flood. Now, infighting has been a thing since Doom, so it's not like seeing this as revolutionary, but that doesn't make it any less cool to watch. We are not on the ship for very long before we run out of options and have to jump down into a pool of coolant.
Analyzing damage. This hole was caused by some kind of explosive. Very powerful if it tore through the ship's hull. All I detect down there are pools of coolant. We should continue our search somewhere else. Warning, threat level increasing. That jump into the coolant is looking better all the time, Chief. Trust me, it's deep enough to cushion our fall.
This mission, similarly to the library, sort of requires you just run through it. It's dark and there's an insane amount of enemies running around. If you hang back, they'll fight each other, but if you get seen, the Flood will start rushing you. This mission is pretty much just that. It's honestly one of the least memorable levels in the game, and a good portion of it just feels like playing the third level again with the added Flood element. At some point, we reach the grav lift to take us back up into the ship and we ascend again. From here, it's a matter of fighting our way through the corridors until we finally find Captain Keyes. And he's not looking so hot.
No human life signs detected. The captain, he's one of them. We can't let the Flood get off this ring. You know what he'd expect. What he'd want us to do. It's done. I have the code. We should go. You need to get back to the Pillar of Autumn. Let's go back to the shuttle bay and find a ride.
After this, it's just a matter of killing our way to the hangar and escaping the same way we did last time, only with a Banshee this time. And we're headed for the final level, the end of the road.
Hold.
We're not gonna make it.
We'll make it.
Pull up! Pull up! You did that on purpose, didn't you?
We're back on the Pillar of Autumn now, and things are a little different this time. The Flood has sort of taken root throughout the ship like they were trying to do on the Truth and Reconciliation, only here there was no human resistance. They're able to feed off of the human and the Covenant forces here to continue growing their ranks, and it's turned the whole thing into a ship of walking corpses. So the reason we're here is to set the self-destruct sequence and use the explosion to destroy the ring so no one can get their hands on Halo's power. To do this, we need to make our way to the bridge and utilize the control panel to get the sequence started. After we finally get there and get things running, Guilty Spark decides to come thwart our plans by disabling it.
I leave home for a few days and look what happens. This won't take long. There. That should give us enough time to make it to a lifeboat and put some distance between ourselves and Halo before the detonation.
I'm afraid that's out of the question, really.
Oh, hell.
Ridiculous! That you would imbue a warship's AI with such a wealth of knowledge? Weren't you worried it might be captured or destroyed?
He's in my data arrays, a local tab.
You can't imagine how exciting this is! To have a record of all of our lost time! Human history, is it? Fascinating. Oh, how I will enjoy every moment of its categorization! To think that you would destroy this installation as well as this record! I am shocked. Almost too shocked for words.
He stopped the self-destruct sequence.
Why do you continue to fight us, Reclaimer? You cannot win. Give us the construct, and I will endeavor to make your death relatively painless and...
At least I still have control over the comm channels.
Where is he?
I'm detecting taps throughout the ship. Sentinels, most likely. As for the monitor, he's in engineering. He must be trying to take the core offline. Even if I could get the countdown restarted, I don't know what to do.
How much firepower would you need to crack one of the engine's shields?
Not much. A well-placed grenade, perhaps, but why? Okay, I'm coming with you. Chief, Sentinels!
So now it's a matter of going to the ship's core and blowing it up manually to set off a chain reaction and cause the Autumn to explode. Shouldn't be too hard since we take a little detour and grab some extra ammo and rockets. Also, if you haven't played before, make sure you go all the way to the back of the armory for a special surprise. I just peeked in and grabbed the rockets for this playthrough. Now we blow the reactor and it's time to get the hell out of here. Here we are. It's all been building to this, the most iconic finale in video game history. We're at the Warthog run. Grabbing a Warthog, we gotta put pedal to metal to get off this ship before it explodes and takes us with it. No worries, I found the grunt Easter egg, of course, so you could see it.
Good thing that food nipple's waiting for me at the starship, cause man, if I worked up a big, grunty thirst!
And it's time to drive until we can get extracted out of here. And look, there's our ride. Except...
Cortana to Echo 419. 2 Covenant Banshees are approaching on your 6. Evade. Say again, evade. On him. Say that. Say that. What the hell? I can't hold her. I can't hold her.
Echo 419! She's gone. Calculating alternate escape route. Ship's inventory shows 1 longsword fighter is still docked in launch phase 7. If we move now, we can make it.
Alright, we're on our own. Time to gun it to the hangar. Not much time left.
That's the ship! Move! We need to get aboard now!
Halo Combat Evolved. It's one of the best and most important video games ever made, and has impacted so many lives in profound and meaningful ways that even I can't begin to explain in this video. The narrative, the structure, the characters, everything. It's just beautiful. It's a beautiful game. Halo CE has some of the most finely tuned and rewarding gameplay of any first-person shooter ever made. It's responsive, intuitive, and satisfying. From the way that the weapons handle to the choice of binding grenade throws to their own button, playing this game was just so fun it had people coming back for more every time they beat it. I may not be able to adequately express the importance of this game, but what I can do is break down some other aspects of it. In my original first draft of the script, I had a section meant for breaking down the different characters in Combat Evolved, but it felt redundant since I already had a section for addressing the different factions, so I figured I'd do them at the same time. Halo sees 4 different factions across its campaign, believe it or not, and I'm about to break them down here. The first faction we're introduced to is of course the UNSC, or the Humans, a military force currently defending humanity from the vicious attacks of the Covenant of alien races currently attempting to exterminate them. We play as John, known more commonly as the Master Chief, a human who was genetically altered as a child to become a super soldier. He's twice as fast, strong, and capable as any regular human, which makes him a formidable foe for the Covenant and one of humanity's last hopes. Working with the Chief is an artificial intelligence unit called Cortana, designed and deliberately modeled after a genius scientist named Dr. Halsey. Cortana is pretty much a sassy supercomputer. She'll be in your head for most of the game, and I mean that literally. Along the way, we'll meet a few fun characters such as Captain Keyes and the fan favorite Sergeant Johnson. Keyes is the ship captain for the Pillar of Autumn and a genuine certified badass. If you don't know his origin, I recommend reading the book Halo: The Cold Protocol. I read it as a kid and it seriously changed how I saw this character. He's awesome. In-game, however, he's still pretty cool. Sergeant Johnson should need no introduction. Efficient, fast, and badass. Letting this character die in this game is forbidden. Even though he'll just show up again in later missions, if you see him die, restarting at a checkpoint is mandatory. He also has his own book, Contact Harvest, and it's the only Halo book written by Bungie writer Joseph Staten. So, of course it's one of the best. Johnson is a fan favorite for a reason, alright? Put them together with our Marines, and we've got a top-notch crew to stop the Covenant from firing the gun pointed at the head of the universe. As for our primary enemies, the Covenant are a unified force of multiple different types of alien races. They all have lore-accurate names like Sangheili, but for this video, I'll be calling them by their human-given names since that's all we had back in the day when this game dropped. Let's start with the Grunts. They may look small and unthreatening to us, and their high-pitched voices and cowardly attitudes can give us the idea that they're nearly harmless. It is important to remember, however, that as Spartans, we're nearly 7'2". In actuality, Grunts stand about the height of your average human adult, sometimes standing as tall as 5'6". They're far more tenacious than they might come across as well, and utilize their skills with plasma weapons, grenades, and fuel rods to utterly decimate their foes. Then we have the Jackals. These creatures are always armed with a powerful plasma shield that can deflect most any projectile weapon and even withstand a huge amount of plasma damage before overheating and shutting down. They always carry a plasma pistol because they can fit it in the groove of the plasma shield and fire at you while not taking damage. By themselves, they can be killed with ease, but in a group of enemies, their charged plasma pistol bolt can totally zap your shields and get you killed. Third, we have the Elites, one of the more common and the most dangerous enemies in the game. There are different varieties of Elite, some more dangerous than others, starting with the most common Blue Elite. They sport a standard issue plasma rifle, and they're quick to dodge attacks and throw grenades to take you out. After that, we have the Crimson Elites, which are pretty much the same as the Blue Elites, only tougher and harder to kill. After that, we have the Silver Elites, who turn invisible utilizing cloaking technology. These Elites carry around an energy sword that will cut both you and your Marines to pieces before you even realize they're there if you aren't careful. Then you have the Gold Elites, who also carry a sword but are not cloaked. They're some of the toughest in the bunch, and they're very fast. Lastly, you will face the Special Operations Elites, notable for their black armor and only seen near the very end of the game. These elites are tougher than the others, and they are the fastest of the bunch, especially at throwing grenades. And finally, we have the Hunters. Hunters always travel in pairs and are armed with a massive, nearly indestructible shield and a fuel rod cannon built into their armor. If you don't have a magnum or a sniper rifle to take them out, they can be extremely dangerous. No, I'm not going to go into their lore and what they actually are because I'm saving all of that for if I do a video on Halo 2 and I can really go crazy on the lore for all of these aliens. Remember when I said I was going to talk about the rule of threes earlier? Well, this is what I meant. The Covenant are set up to be the main enemy of the game, but instead, the rug is pulled out from under the player's feet by introducing a total of 3 enemy factions. 4 if you count the Sentinels, but we'll get to that. We talked a good bit about what the Flood are already, a parasitic life form. You'll only really see them in a few different forms in this game, the first of which is their pod form. They are fairly harmless to the Chief in this state, but their overwhelming numbers can really do some serious damage to your shields if you're not paying attention. Then you'll often see them shimmying towards you in their carrier form, where multiple pods have all condensed themselves into one moving creature. These forms can be one of the most dangerous despite their slow speeds and lack of ranged attacks, because they explode when they get too close, and the damage caused by that explosion can be game-ending. Lastly, you'll most often see them in their combat form, which is just after the parasite has taken over a corpse as a host and assumed control of the body's nervous system. You'll see different types of combat forms depending on the bodies. Most common are elite and human infected forms. The Sentinels are a faction of millions of floating robots armed with beam lasers that can be extremely effective against both the Flood and you. There's only one kind of Sentinel encountered on this Halo though. 343 Guilty Spark is not a Sentinel, but he fits into the faction since they follow his orders. The Forerunner Monitor of Installation 04, who himself cares only about containing the Flood and preserving the integrity of Halo. The multiple factions in this game do so much for both the immersion and gameplay. Halo could have been a standard shooter set in space, just you fighting aliens on a cool ring world. The introduction of the Flood completely flips the game's entire standard upside down, and the existence of the Sentinels makes the world feel real and lived in. Simply put, Halo wouldn't be Halo without them. Come on now. You really think I'm gonna have a Halo retrospective without talking about the multiplayer? Funny thing about it is that the multiplayer was barely even finished in time for it to ship. According to multiple devs, the studio was constantly back and forth on cutting the multiplayer component outright and shipping the game as a single-player campaign, because they kept struggling to make it feel like a fleshed-out mode and not a tacked-on time waster. They claimed that they were on the fence about cutting it even as close as 3 weeks from it shipping. I'm so glad they kept it because it's awesome and I love it. It's influential beyond explanation and still a lot of fun even to this day. The most simplistic of the franchise's offerings, Combat Evolved's multiplayer features 5 different game modes to choose from: Slayer, Capture the Flag, Race, King of the Hill, and Oddball. I am, of course, going to break them down. Slayer is just deathmatch with a different name. Throw the player onto a map and let them kill each other until the score is reached. This can be done in teams or as a free-for-all. Easily the most popular game mode for anyone wanting to run CE, this mode exemplifies what would become Halo's staple design for its multiplayer: map control. More on that later. Capture the Flag is literally well, you know what Capture the Flag is. 2 opposing teams must cross the map to acquire the enemy flag and return it to their base without losing their own flag. Better on bigger maps and with more players. Race is an interesting one. Waypoints pop up across the map and each player must race against each other to hit that waypoint first. When that waypoint is reached, the next waypoint occurs somewhere else on the map. The first player to reach all of the waypoints wins. Simple, fun, but not as popular as the other game modes. although it would continue appearing in other titles going forward. King of the Hill is Chaos. A small circle appears on the map, and the teams must fight over who can stay in the circle the longest. If one or more members of each team is in the circle at once, then no time is granted. It's just a grenade fest, honestly. Lastly, Oddball. While not exactly what people think when you say the word Halo, make no mistake, this game mode is just about as synonymous with Halo as the titular ring itself is. A skull will appear on the map, and all players must fight to see who can hold the ball the longest. So, with these game modes available to us, now we need arenas to play them. The original Halo only launched with 13 maps, but I'll obviously talk about the 6 previously PC-only maps as well, and going into some brief lore rantings from myself in the process. Alphabetical order, here we go. The thing about Combat Evolved is that it is localized almost entirely on Installation 04. 90% of the game is on the ring, and the majority of the maps are also on the ring itself. This created an air of mystery when playing this game back in the day, and helped maintain a sort of in-universe consistency. We see that here with Battle Creek, where you can look up and see the ring in the skybox. This will be the case for all of the outdoor maps. What I find to be most exciting about the maps is that they offer an opportunity to explore new locations of the ring that we couldn't see in the single player, which is really cool. The map itself is a classic. We got 2 opposing bases and a rocky arch structure that holds a rocket launcher on top. Overall, it's a great map that still sees a great deal of playtime even now over 20 years later. I think for me to say that Blood Gulch is the most iconic multiplayer map in the franchise would not be a controversial statement. Those familiar or even adjacent to the Halo IP have heard of or seen footage of this map, if only due to Rooster Teeth's iconic 5-season Blood Gulch Chronicles art from their groundbreaking web series, Red vs. Blue. Now, I couldn't do a complete retrospective on Halo without mentioning RVB at least once. So if you're not familiar, this map launched an entire genre of online web series called Machinima, short for Machine Cinema, wherein people made short films and shows using characters and locations from popular video games. Red vs. Blue was the most popular of these by far, and has gone on for like almost 20 seasons at this point. But it all started here, where the first few seasons centered on the characters fighting against each other to capture the other team's flag, which is what this map is certainly designed to accommodate. I love the look of it with the rocky aesthetic and outdoor look. I know we love Blood Gulch, but I have a lot of maps left to cover, so let's move on. Look, I know this is widely regarded as one of the worst maps in the series, so much that even a lot of you who have played the games don't even recognize this map. It features 2 human ships across from one another, with their sides exposed, seemingly for a training exercise, and nothing but the void to catch you if you fall. Teleporters take players instantly across the map to the other ship, and the size is meant to handle the max amount of players. This is actually one of the few maps that is not set on Halo itself. When I was younger, I was fascinated by this map. I so badly wanted to play it online, but I couldn't. To this day, even with the MCC out, I have not been able to play this map online. I'm fairly certain they don't even have it in matchmaking rotation. This is one of the smallest maps in the game, and is one of the most fun. It's asymmetrical in design and features no bases or anything, meaning it's great for 4v4 Team Slayer or just all-out free-for-all. It's got a Covenant design, which indicates that it may or may not be on the actual ring itself, potentially making it one of the very few maps to not take place on Installation 04. I don't think it's on the Truth and Reconciliation, which means it's probably located somewhere not on the ring. This map is a cluster of chaos. Its concept is super interesting, and I feel like it could be fun, but it ends up just not pulling it off very well. Essentially, we have a series of rooms, each connected by multiple teleporters which dart you all over the place into different rooms. If you ever saw one of those old Scooby-Doo cartoons where they keep running into rooms and coming out of different ones, yeah, it's pretty much that. This is the first map so far with an established lore that doesn't leave it up to us having to figure it out. Although the game calls it a Spartan cloning facility, that is not canonically accurate. However, the map was used for training Spartans. As part of the Chiron test station, TL-34 served as a way to train Spartans how to navigate the interiors of Covenant ships due to the similarity of the narrow corridors. The purpose of the teleporters was to force each Spartan to feel totally blind upon entering a new room and have to work as a team and think fast how to handle what they encountered in a split second. No breaching or planning. Each room was also designed so that any strategy that applied to one room could not work in another. This is another level that does not take place on Halo, but rather somewhere else. Not all maps have lore, by the way, so I won't have this much to say on all of them. This is one of those maps that you seemingly cannot get away from. It's got multiple renditions across the various games, and all of them are the same map. I don't hate it, but I really do not love it either. It's a bigger map, and it does play very well. I do love the aesthetic too, because we're back to the Covenant design now, which actually almost makes this map break canon. It was important that I mentioned the stress this multiplayer component caused the team earlier, because there had to be some clear disconnect regarding lore. This map is a hydro processing facility used to control water flow. Even on Bungie.net back in the day, this map was said to be used by the Covenant to control water flow somewhere on Installation 04. But you're telling me the Covenant built this whole hydro processing plant in like a day? The first game takes place over 3 days, from humanity and the Covenant finding the ring to its destruction. That means they'd have to build this thing in a handful of hours. So let's just play lore nerd for a second and just try to place this map in the lore for fun. Here's my theory. Let's say the Covenant did build this hydro processing plant in roughly a day using their alien tech. Why? What was the point of controlling the water flow? Well, if we look at the level 343 Guilty Spark from the campaign, it has a very swampy aesthetic to it. Yes, this is just what the flood looked like in general, but what if parts of this area were flooded by water and the Covenant built a hydro processing plant nearby just over one of those hills in order to redirect water flow away from this valley so they could access what they were hoping was the way to the library? Far-fetched? Yes, but this game has literally zero flood-related multiplayer maps, so I thought it could be cool to headcanon this one into being one. Here we find another map that does not take place on Installation 04. Referred to by the UNSC as Deep Space Anomaly number 0198, Derelict is a very small space station that rests in orbit just outside of the planet Threshold. From here, the player can see Threshold and its moon Basis, but we can't see Halo. I assume it has to be on the other side of the planet or just too far away to really see it. This is likely a small observatory station, and since we know it's Forerunner, we know it's been here for a really long time. It may have been used as a way to store things near the gas giant or meet other incoming ships to exchange cargo without having to break atmosphere. I mean, with Halo being out here, maybe there were hundreds of small stations just like this one used for similar purposes. But whatever it is, there's only one here, and I can't get over what a cool feeling it is to see the area from this different perspective. Feels lonely, isolating. Such a familiar setting, but to be all alone in this tiny station, and know that Halo is just beyond the horizon. There isn't much to say about the gameplay for this, honestly. It's got a camo and some overshields. It's circular, and in the files, this map is actually called Carousel, which we assume was its original name due to its spinning design. It's a fun map, and its design ends up coming back in later games as well. I have never in my life known a map that I am so endeared to despite hating so much. Seriously, I love this map, and I also hate it. Its design is pretty terrible, and I'm really bad at it, but it's so memorable and interesting and fun that every time it's loaded up, I'm excited. The map itself is a huge Forerunner warehouse-like building with dozens of tombstone structures littered throughout the ground area and opposing office-like rooms on each side of the building. It's also got a scaffolding which seemed to connect the offices at one time. Playing this map is hell, and if you played it, you know what I'm talking about. There's no lore really, but I think it's pretty obvious this structure was used for storage by the Forerunners before they all died. I mean, it's literally a warehouse. This map is 2 parallel hallways within a Forerunner structure, supposedly somewhere in a building on Installation 04. It's a fun map for game modes like King of the Hill, but I'm not really crazy about it otherwise because, again, it's just 2 parallel hallways. It can make for some fun chaos when rockets or grenades get involved, but I'm still not crazy about it. As for lore, I've seen speculation that these hallways are actually located within the library due to the architecture and design being similar, and since we don't have any maps related to that area, I like that theory, so I'm buying into it. Another popular map, this is probably the most vertical of the existing options. With 3 different floors, all visible to one another, map control becomes crucial. Grabbing either the sniper, shotgun, or camo before your enemy could actually determine the outcome of a given match. Yeah, remember when I talked about map control earlier and said I was bringing it up again? Well, now it's time. This map epitomizes the concept. Essentially, getting to the power weapons and vantage points on this map will literally decide if you win or lose a match. While definitely set on Halo, it's not clear where this level is located on the ring. It has Forerunner architecture and design, but also seems to be a small prison area as the name implies. This is one of my least favorite maps of the game. It's brown and dingy and very ugly on the eyes, not to mention its flow is very strange. The design is built around 3 big rooms connected by traveling either up or down a ramp to find enemy players. There's also side areas to go through and teleporters to help sneak up and catch the enemy off guard. This is also probably the least fitting map of the game in both looks and story. Similarly to Damnation, the lore for this map is very hard to buy given the time restraint. Bungie.net described this map as a UNSC attempt to mine this particular area of Installation 04, but that feels genuinely impossible. There were only 3 days between the ring being discovered and destroyed. Not to mention that humanity was scattered, outnumbered, and on the run. The closest thing we see to an organized military operation is when Keyes takes Johnson and some Marines to storm the flood holding area in 343 Guilty Spark. Although I made some justifications for Damnation's similar lore explanation, the Covenant had significantly more resources, units, and far better technology. It's almost believable that they could quickly create a small hydro processing plant to redirect water flow in about 2 days if they built off of pre-existing Forerunner structures. This, however, is not possible. I suppose maybe some survivors could have built it near the wreckage of the Autumn before the flood got loose, out in that desert area using resources from the crashed ship. I don't know, I'm gonna chalk this up to being a relic from when the game was in its RTS phase of development and potentially had the conflict between humanity and the Covenant lasting far longer. I think this might be the largest map in the base game actually, and it is without doubt a fan favorite. The icy biome, the huge open design of the canyon, the 2 bases beside each other but separated by a giant chunk of rock between them that forces players to either drive vehicles around or cut through on foot. The horseshoe design of Sidewinder has become iconic now, and as with so many of the maps we've covered, has been recreated many times in later games. Although the map is massive and beloved, there isn't actually much lore on this one. It really is just a huge canyon amidst some of the icy parts of Installation 4's biome. The last of the multiplayer maps that came on the original Xbox, Wizard is one of the only maps with interior modeled after the human UNSC aesthetic, which is strange given that it's clearly located on Halo, as we can see outside of it. I've seen some theories on its origin, and the most popular is that it was quickly assembled by the small resistance of human survivors saved by the Chief in the second mission of the campaign before they moved on to the rest of the missions. Like, a place to plan and gather resources, I guess, before they assaulted the Truth and Reconciliation. It could also be a chunk of the Pillar of Autumn. Like a room that just ended up exposed after the ship crash landed. I don't know, these are just multiplayer maps. I don't think they were giving the canonicity that much thought, unlike nerds like you and me. Alright, we've covered all of the multiplayer maps that came with the original Xbox version of the game, so it's time to talk about the maps that came exclusively with the Gearbox PC port of Halo CE back in the day. These maps were not developed by Bungie, and up until the MCC, a very select minority of people had ever even seen them before. The lore in these is also extremely light, and most of them look the same. First up is Danger Canyon. In yet another canyon map, this particular one exemplifies one of the biggest issues with all of the Gearbox maps in my opinion. They're all way too damn big. Like, my suspicion is that they wanted to add some bigger maps for people to play BTB and stuff on, since so many of the base game's maps are so small, but these take it too far. The map has two massive Forerunner bridges connecting it, and two bases on opposite sides of the canyon, with different ways to cut through the mountain and a few vehicles to drive through the valleys. It's not terrible, but like a lot of the ones we're about to see, it's too big, and playing it takes too long to find the action. This is one of two maps that I kind of like from the Gearbox maps, and it actually does have something cool to show lore-wise, even though I don't think Gearbox was actually doing it on purpose. The design is just a smaller version of the campaign level, the Silent Cartographer. So, like the name implies, just an island. The layout does allow you to go on top of the island if you use teleporters, which is cool, or you can fight with vehicles on the beachfront. There's also a sliced out area in the center of the island where players can cut through the middle to make it easier. Here is where we actually get some lore. This being similar to the Silent Cartographer, we see a huge hatch that we know actually opens up into the interior sections of Halo itself. The reason this is so cool is because it's the only other time in the entire series we ever see this again. On the ring, there are these huge hatches that let people access the innards of the structure and travel from point to point, yet we only ever see them 2 times in the franchise. On the Silent Cartographer, and right here. Disclaimer, I have not played Halo Wars, so there may be some there, but I don't think so. If this video does well, I probably will do the whole franchise though, so we'll see. The only genuinely interesting Gearbox-made map in the game, this one has a nighttime aesthetic and looks like it probably takes place somewhere near where Truth and Reconciliation happens in the campaign. There's an enormous Forerunner bridge connecting 2 bases with a handful of different vehicles which can be used to cross the map, and 2 massive cliffside ledges fitted with plasma turrets and sniper rifles. There are 2 other maps that are similar to this later in the series, the most notable of which is Narrows from Halo 3, but this one is, like I said earlier, too big. It's not really that much fun to play due to its enormous size. There is a secret room under the bridge where you can access some special supplies with a Banshee. See if you can find it. Another canyon map, but with an icy aesthetic, kinda like Sidewinder. This one is one of the better designed maps in this Gearbox collection in my opinion, and even though it's big, it's not so big that it isn't fun. A solid map for running BTB on, but overall, I don't have much to say about this map, and I'm getting burnt out analyzing these, so let's finish this up. This is my least favorite of all the Gearbox maps. It's enormous, and it's literally just laid out like an infinity symbol built into a canyon. It's got some long bridges connecting parts of the canyons very similar to the other Gearbox map, Danger Canyon, but somehow worse. If you're playing Race, this is the map. It's huge and has a ton of versatility for navigation. But if you're playing Slayer or something, it's pretty much like a worse version of Battlefield, spending half the game running around looking for the action. Following the worst Gearbox map, we get one of the better ones. Timberland takes place in a very serene-looking valley with 2 bases on opposite sides, of course, and a stream of water flowing through the center of the map. There's trees and hills to use for cover, a handful of vehicles, and the map isn't so big that it feels obnoxious. It's a great size for CTF in particular. And that's it! We did it! Now you've seen every map available to play in Halo Combat Evolved. I actually really enjoyed looking at the Bungie maps, but I'm not really a fan of the Gearbox ones. It's not often that a retrospective on a game more than 20 years old can genuinely recommend you go play that game's multiplayer, but thanks to the Master Chief Collection being on Steam, you can go download and play Halo CE multiplayer literally right now as of uploading this. And although it's not really thriving, the community does definitely exist, and I even played a good handful of matches while making this video. So while you finish the rest of this video, pull up Steam and go ahead and get the MCC downloading in the background. Halo is special. The style, the timing, the console exclusivity, the concept, everything. I really feel like you'd be hard-pressed to find a contrarian who could make the claim that Halo Combat Evolved's release did not permanently alter the video game industry, and actually mean that statement. This game wasn't just lightning in a bottle, it was the whole damn storm. A perfect storm, as it were. From its origins as a Mac exclusive to being a launch title for the original Xbox. Halo was the reason to buy an Xbox for thousands of people. There's a couple of things I'm going to address in this conclusion before we wrap things up that I didn't have a place for earlier, one of those being the music. Now, I don't need to tell you how iconic that main theme is. Let's be honest, you've heard it before. The Monk chant, written by Marty O'Donnell, was done in like a day if you didn't know that. Then the rest of the iconic score would of course be done by Marty and his frequent co-composer, Michael Salvatore. The tribal drums of the battle theme, the somber strings of the more emotional moments. The music of Combat Evolved was unlike anything the competition was offering in its games at the time. It just would not be a proper retrospective if I didn't talk about the music of this game, because it was a huge part of what made playing through this experience so insanely memorable. The other thing I want to briefly talk about is the 2011 Anniversary Remaster. I don't have much to say about it, but I've beaten the game entirely with the Anniversary graphics more than once, and I am more than familiar enough with it to say a few things on it. After Bungie left Microsoft to pursue development on Destiny under Activision, Halo was put under the care of a new team called 343 Industries. The team was young, but did feature one or two former team members from Bungie. Unfortunately, all of the other Halo alumni would stay on with Bungie to work on Destiny, and most of them would fracture and leave because of that game. A story for another time, however. The 343 team got to work on remastering the graphics of Combat Evolved for the Xbox 360 and released it as Halo Combat Evolved Anniversary Edition to mixed reception. Many praised its bold new interpretation on formerly underdeveloped maps like the library, while others criticized their overstepping, resulting in a total loss of original atmospheric intent on levels like 343 Guilty Spark. Then there were some very real points to be made about things like changing the models on trees and other environmental factors that made it to where the hitbox was the same as the original, but the graphics tricked you into thinking you could shoot between branches or hide behind a rock that wasn't really there. But the scenery on levels like Assault on the Control Room are so breathtaking with the newer graphics that it's honestly admirable, and has its place as a method of seeing the ring in a bit more of a fully realized state. I like the remaster overall, and the foresight to make it with the original graphics built in, so it acted as both a port and a remaster on a whim, is, to this day, the best way I've seen a beloved classic handled. Many fans were not pleased with the result, however, and have since taken to handling it themselves with projects like the exceptional Halo 3 Combat Evolved mod, which brings the original Halo into a new light using a mixture of both new and original Halo 3 assets. The community around Halo rarely ceases to amaze, and there's a reason for that. The game is just so important to so many people, we both can't and don't want to let it go, looking for as many ways and reasons to relive and experience the games as we can. Well, that's it. I know there's things I probably missed, and my original plan was to do an obnoxiously in-depth retrospective to the point of giving a full breakdown of every weapon and vehicle in the game, and a lore breakdown of them all too, along with everything else like the vehicles and enemies. But those plans were scrapped in favor of a more focused retrospective that didn't take me another 6 months to do like the Metal Gear Solid one did. If you loved this one though, maybe I'll really just go all out for Halo 2 next time. Thanks so much for watching, guys. These long-form retrospectives are really fun for me, but take a good bit of time. If you enjoy these things, consider liking this video, commenting, and subscribing to the channel. I like to do smaller videos in between these videos too, everything from shorter commentary to my Retro Room quick breakdown videos of older games I'm playing through currently. So consider sticking around. Again, thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. That's all I've got for you.
Come here, you mother... Oh, This is it, baby. Hold me.